Today we have a new topic. In general, guys, we have two parts in software testing: static testing and dynamic testing. So today, the first part, which is static testing. Okay, here is the outlines of our course, of our topic today, which is testing techniques. We see the testing techniques. We can say the big picture of all the testing techniques. And then we see what the difference between the one I just told you, which is static testing and dynamic testing. Then today we'll see different static testing techniques. So our topic is only static testing techniques or methods. I have to read it. Okay. So here you see the outlines. As I mentioned, today's topic is static testing techniques. So you will see the different types of static testing. And we have in general two types of the static testing. The first one is review. The second one is static analysis. So you have to know and understand these two topics in the end of this lecture. So here it's okay, static testing techniques. As I mentioned, first is the big picture or all the different types of testing. So we have two types of testing. The first one is the static testing, while the second one is dynamic testing. So under the static testing, we have a lot of techniques. Under the dynamic testing, we have a lot of techniques. So let's first see, maybe this is in the second slide, but I will talk about it here. What the difference between static and dynamic. So if you first, okay, if you talk about, for example, any documents in your system, this document can be considered as a static description of the code, static description of the requirements. So once we talk about static, that means we are going to test that static documents, which is either the code or any other documents. So if we are talking about the code, for example, only, so the code will not be executed in static testing, while it will be executed in dynamic testing. So this is the main difference between these two. So in the static testing, the code will not be executed, and sometimes we don't have code at all, because we will not test only the code. We test also other parts of or other documents, what we call is the artifacts. So here is the main difference, which is in static testing, we don't need to execute the documents. While in the programming or in the dynamic testing, we have to execute it, and then we see, for example, we compare the output with the input. Okay, under the static testing, we have static testing review. And the second one, static testing analysis. So we have different type of review. So if we talk about review, that's mean we are reviewing something. We are reviewing the code, reviewing the documents. So just review, survey, review, or check that document. So we have different type, formal and informal one, and then the third, the second, informal, which is the first type of review, the formal or informal, and then the rest is formal. While the static testing or the static testing analysis, or just we say static analysis, it's focus on analyze the document. In the first one, review the document, for example, review with the requirement or against the requirement or something like this. But in the static analysis, we will analyze the code. So in the two parts, the aim is to catch more defects. I think in general, in all of them, it's just catching more defects. So we will not now discuss the dynamic testing because it will take time, and we will discuss it next class. So this is just for today, it's the static testing. we have the two parts, which is review and analysis. So here, okay, something about what I have told you right now, which is the difference between the dynamic and static. So let's go for also here, also the dynamic and static. So as I mentioned, anything is not, any testing doesn't require to execute the code. So this is, we call it is static testing. While if we execute the code, so that's what it's dynamic testing. So in V model, if we just take that example, if you see in all the V models, what we do if we in the first part, which is the left part, there we just review all the documents against the previous stage or the previous step, right? Do you remember how the testing in the V model? We just every time we say, okay, we have, for example, we are in the design, so we will review our design against the requirement, right? So this is, it's part of static testing, While here in the second part, which is the validations, that's when we test the code. For example, we have the code, if you remember, it was this part is the code, and then we test the code, the first testing, for example, the unit code, and then the component. So that's what it's the dynamic testing in this part, which is in the right part, which is dynamic testing. So guys, before I go, is it clear now, the dynamic and static? So static, just as I told you, just review any documents. So that's why when we see any documents, we not only the code, review that document without executing that document. While the second part, which is second testing, which is dynamic testing, we have to execute that document. So here the static testing. Okay, is it clear, guys? The two techniques, which is static and dynamic. Before I go to the next. Hello?
Seems to be clear.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Clear.
Okay.
If it's clear to Suyan.
Okay, that's great. So when we talk now about static testing. So guys, static testing is testing the components of the system at the specification or implementation stage. So as I mentioned, without executing the software or the program. So it's a type of reviewing the document, reviewing the specification or the design or the implementation of the system. The object of this stage or this type of testing is the document. So mostly it's any type of document, such as the requirements, also the design, and also the code, of course. So here, object, while the objective is detect the fault. So the objective of this testing also tools or these testing types, which is static testing, is also detecting the fault and detecting also the defects. So similar to other types of the testing, the goal or the objective of the testing tools or testing techniques, it's just is fault detections. Fault detections, here some example of types of detects that can be, or types of defects that can be detected by these testing types. Later we'll see in the next slide. So the basic idea or the general idea of these static tools or these static testings is defect preventions. So as we mentioned, okay, the failure or the software failure, it's caused by some defect in your code or in your documents. So now by using this static testing, we trying to prevent that kind of failure by detecting the defects in the early stage. So you can imagine that you have a fault in your application, on your software. So if you detect it now by using this technique, which is static techniques, review the application or review the project program or the documents. So you will save time later, and you will prevent that defect to be appear in the advanced stage. So here is the basic idea: is just to detect the fault in the early stage. So here is the benefit of static testing. As we mentioned, the static testing, it's done in the early stage, so it can save times, and then you can get some feedback from the user based on that testing techniques. Also, it's the benefit of this type of testing, it's that is cost effective. Why is cost effective? Because it's done in the early stage. Then you can detect the failure, or you can detect the fault in the early stage. Then you will save time, also you save money, because if we detect it in the advanced stage, so it will be more expensive. So the static testing is not just trying to test the application, is it working as expected or not? No, also there is also some techniques that can be used for discover some kind of errors, or some kind of what we can call it. It's something, maybe you can call it is problem. For example, poor programming problems in the application, or in the writing the code itself. For example, they give you some example like the did codes, infinite loops. So this kind of problems also can be discovered and detected using these static testing. So here, this is the type of defects. For example, deviations from the standards. If you are following some standards, some patterns, so there is some, maybe if there is any deviations from the standards can be detected here. If there is some missing requirements, also design defects, if there is some design defects, also if the code is non-maintainable. So all these type of fault or defects can be detected in this type of, or using this type of testing.